Imagine you're a federal worker and you get an email, $25,000 to quit your job. No? How about 50,000? Will that do it? This is not a scam. This is what's happening across many agencies to thousands of federal employees. Should you take the money? What should you know? Let's get into it. The federal government's on a mission to shrink big time. Several agencies are leading the way with buyouts. They're paying you to quit. First, we have the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. They just emailed 80,000 workers. Think CDC scientists, FDA inspectors, Medicare admins. They're paying you up to $25,000, but you have to decide quick because you have until March 14th at 5 p.m. to make a decision. Then there's the Social Security Administration, or SSA. They're targeting about 7,000 people within their workforce, and they're hitting them with the double whammy. You have the buyout payments and the early retirement. For buyouts, they're doing $15,000 to $25,000 depending on your GS grade. The SSA's opt-in starts March 14th with a tight deadline of noon that day for cash and early outs running through December. This is a really small window in which employees can apply, and just because you fill out the form, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get a buyout or an early retirement, so you have to let your supervisor know. Now, as far as the money goes, this is the breakdown for SSA. Employees up to GS8, they get $15,000. GS9 to GS12, you get $20,000. GS13 and above, you get $25,000. But you're not getting that whole amount because taxes. So federal withholding is going to be 22% right off the top. Then you have your state taxes. You're looking at about around 30%. So in reality, $25,000 ends up being closer to $17,000, give or take a few $100. Now this money could be worth it to you if you were already planning on leaving. If you had transition plans and you're eyeing a job in the private sector, then this is just extra money on top. Now, something to be aware of is for this buyout, for this separation pay, you are not eligible to accept it if you have already accepted the deferred resignation program. Then we have the Security Exchange Commission, the SEC. They're willing to go a little bit further than the other agencies, and they're going to go ahead and double that amount. So $25K times 2, they're going to give you $50,000 if you retire or if you resign. Now, SEC is very serious about downsizing. They've already canceled a couple of their leases with buildings. If you do accept the $50,000, you would have to wait 5 years before coming back into the agency. Otherwise, you would have to pay that money back. And here's a little fun fact. The SEC actually investigated Elon Musk at least 4 times since 2018. Let's go back to HHS. This buyout, this is step 1. Let's say 16,000 people take it. That's roughly 20% of the agency. That saves $400 million. That's a good amount of money. The problem is right now that the CDC is battling a measles outbreak in West Texas. 40 cases and 2 deaths so far. Lose too many workers and it could impact the containment of this outbreak, and not just this one, but the outbreaks that we're going to have in the future. Now the SSA, they have 56,000 workers. This is down from 66 in 2010. We're at a 50-year low, and there's 67 million Americans counting on Social Security. Last month, they announced a major reorganization, cutting 7,000 people. Really, they can't afford to cut 7,000. They're already at a very low point when it comes to their workforce. This is going to have negative repercussions within the Social Security Administration, but they're going to go ahead and cut this. Maybe they'll backfill it with contractors. Right now, they're talking about cutting it. They're also using early retirement, which is VERA. You're eligible if you're 50 years old with 20 years of service or any age with 25 years of service. You can retire between March 1st and December 31st, leaving by year's end. SSA is being blunt with its strategy. Non-critical roles, backroom roles, they could be facing forced cuts if they don't accept this deal. So they're putting the pressure on their people to really incentivize taking this deal. Why is this happening? If you haven't figured it out yet, Trump's second administration is all about the cuts. So first we had the deferred resignation program, 77,000 employees jumped on that. Then you had the probationary purge where we lost close to 25,000 people. So that's over 100,000 people. This is the next step. offering early retirement, offering incentive packages to get people to leave. And then what we're going to see in the mid to the end of this month is RIFs, reduction in force plans. Now, these plans are not going to be enacted on a large scale until probably the summer months, but the plans will be revealed this month. You should have an idea what agency is doing what do they prioritize, what offices and roles are deemed critical or not. Part of the RIF strategy is going to include the component of early retirement and incentive payments. So if your agency isn't doing it right now, the chances are they probably will into the future. And it's just not a handful of agencies. This will probably occur to the majority of agencies in the federal government. The VSIP is generally calculated based on the employee's salary and years of service. But it can be a flat amount or up to a certain percentage of the employee's salary, but it can't exceed $25,000. But there are some exceptions. We just looked at the SEC, they're doing $50,000. We've seen DOD in the past. There's some offices within the Department of Defense that have authorized $40,000. So you could see $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 from certain agencies within certain offices. But it's just not that. Also, if you're a federal employee, let's say you're facing a RIF or you're about to quit for whatever reason, you have your leave. Your leave is cashed out. So let's say you have a month of leave. That could be an extra month of pay. The problem with that is it usually takes 2 or 3 months to process it. So it's not like instant cash. Another thing that you should be aware of if you're leaving the federal government, you know FERS, that's your pension, the 4.4% that you contribute every time you get paid. FERS, all those contributions, you can actually get it back. Now, I don't recommend that you do unless you never see yourself going into the government and you're not fully vested for a pension. So it takes 5 years to be vested in a pension. If you have less than 5 years and you're never going to go back into the federal government, you can request a refund, and it could be worth it in that situation. Another thing that you can get refunded is buying back your military time. So if you're a veteran and you bought back, let's say 5, 10, 15 years, and now you're leaving the government and you know that you're never going to come back, then you might want to consider getting a refund on that money that you spent to buy your military time. A lot of people were having issues with that. They were expressing a lot of confusion and a lot of negative emotions about, hey, I just bought back my time and now they're giving me the boot and now they cut my job. I just spent thousands of dollars. What am I going to do? Well, you can ask for that money back. But let me be very clear. If you're fully vested, 5 years or more, or if you seriously want to come back into the federal government to expand your pension, then I wouldn't get a refund on either. Some of these federal agencies are going to learn that as they're losing more and more people to appease the Trump administration, there will be holes, there will be voids throughout the agency. Services will not get completed or they will not get done in a timely manner. And what that means is they're probably going to ask for contractors. They're probably going to request contracting support. That's what happened during Bill Clinton's administration when he cut 300,000 plus federal employees. They had a surge in contracting activity. You're going to have to figure something out because these tasks are not going to be done if you just cut half of the workforce. If you're taking an agency like SSA and you're going to just chop it in half and it's already struggling, a lot of those functions are not going to get completed. Now, if you do not accept the VSIP or you do not accept the early retirement, that is fine. There should be no immediate consequence penalizing you for that. It's your decision. Now, what that does mean is you are potentially open for a RIF. If your agency is planning a RIF, and most of them should be, you could be a target of a RIF. But then the question is, what is your standing? What is your tenure? Are you a career employee? What's your veteran status? If you're doing good on the retention standings, you might be able to endure a RIF. Now, another thing about a RIF, everybody pretty much knows the 4 categories that make up the retention standing. But what's even more important than that is that position mission critical? So if you don't know the answer to that question, is your position mission critical? You need to have a conversation with your supervisor. You might need to have a conversation with HR and figure out that answer. Okay, but should you take the money? You have to consider several things. First is the financial impact. We just talked about it. $25K is really $17K. What is that $17K going to get you? Probably 3 months. 3 months of average living expenses if you're lucky. So, do you have a considerable amount of savings? Do you have another job lined up? Are your retirement plans in position where you can transition without using a large amount of money? Because if you do, if you already have a job lined up and you can start next month because you know a guy that knows a guy and they can get you in, you're a lock for that position, then that might play into the part of, hey, I'm going to go ahead and jump at this money. Next, you got to consider your retirement eligibility. How many years do you have of government service? Is the answer 5? 5 is the magic number. 5 locks in your pension. If you have over 5, let's say you're sitting there with 8, 9, 10 years, you can calculate your pension right now. It'll take you a couple of minutes. All you do is go ahead and get a calculator and input how many years of service do you have. Let's say 10 years. You put 10. Then you times it by your high 3 salary. What's the average of your highest 3 salaries? Usually it's your last 3. So let's say you're a GS-13 in DC, you're making $140,000, $150,000. So you put that figure in there. And then you times it by 1% or 1.1% depending on your years of service. You will find out exactly how much can you expect in a year and then divide it by 12. How much are you going to get per month? Is that number good with you? Are you okay with that? Because that's something else you should consider. Next is future job opportunities. Are your skills in demand? There's some people that work in cybersecurity and their skills are in demand. Maybe you're an administrative specialist and in the federal government, they were willing to pay you $90,000, $100,000 a year. And you know, if you go back to your hometown, the businesses in that area, they're not paying anywhere close to that. Maybe half if you're lucky. Maybe you find $50,000 a year. So you have to do that research and crunch those numbers to see if it makes sense to you. What about your network? Are you on LinkedIn? Do you have an account? You probably should set up an account, reach out to people so that you can leverage that network. Even if you are retiring and you never envision working again, you never know. You don't know if you're going to stop working completely or not. So it's good to have that network. Next is the repayment requirements. Maybe you're thinking, I'm going to sit out this administration and then in a few years, I'm going to jump back in, try to get a federal government job, boost my pension up. You need to understand that in your agency, what is the repayment clause? More important than that, you need to talk to your family and probably a financial advisor, maybe do both, and then come up with a plan. Come up with a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and start making steps towards that plan. Do what's in your best interest. Now, we were just talking about the Social Security Administration. They're having dramatic cuts, and what does that mean for the agency as far as providing benefits to you and the rest of the American public? If you're interested in that, I want you to check this video out next. If you need a federal resume, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.